I'm going to go ahead and ask Jean to come on up, but I'm so excited to hear Jean's story tonight. So welcome, Jean Woodall. How about that?
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
And so this story makes sense. That was my stepmother. She was still great librarian, telling lots of stories. But when you hear the rest of my story, something will not click if you thought that was it. So going back further, when I was 2 and my sister was 6, our mother died. And we were 2 very sad little girls. But our daddy pulled us aside. He had been in World War II. He told us, we've got to just soldier up and move on. Let go of that sadness. Just move on. So I kept my feelings pretty tightly inside when I was growing up. I didn't take up very much space when I was growing up. Sometimes I thought I was invisible and that was safer. However, as I, got a little older, I cried a lot, but it was usually when we read about Timmy and Lassie and Black Beauty and other sympathetic characters in books that you may have read. Then when I got a little older, I got fascinated with going to the movies and seeing romantic comedies, musicals. I loved musicals. I'd get the records and play them and learn all the songs from them. I loved the highs and lows. I loved the songs. I'd walk down the street, embarrass my sister, singing as I was walking down the street. But sometimes I had kind of an ache inside because the songs express feelings that I didn't feel. I was still pretty tightly held inside. When I got to college, I was still living at home in Auburn, Alabama, where I grew up, and my father was an English professor. I studied graphic arts. I dated a few guys. None of them were that special. None of them did it for me. They were nice. We had some fun. But when I graduated, somehow something inside of me said, explore. So I put my portfolio, 2 suitcases, and $200 in my pocket and got on a Greyhound bus for New York City. I was too naive to know I should be scared. So I did have 2 friends who already lived in. They gave me tips, and I was really just lucky. I pounded the pavements. There were no, I didn't have a phone. I didn't have internet. But I found a job and an apartment in a month. And the apartment was terrific. It was a special deal, and I had a roommate. It was on Riverside Drive. If you know New York City, it was the Upper West Side, and I could see the Hudson River out my window. I didn't spend that much time in the apartment because I loved seeing all the fantastic different people there were in New York that I had never seen in Auburn, Alabama. And my favorite thing to do was actually just pack a little lunch and go sit on a boulder in Riverside Park and watch the people go by. One time when I was sitting on that rock, a guy came over and asked if he could join me on my perch. He was ruggedly good looking. He had dark hair and dark eyes and dark beard, and he was wearing a vest he said his 100-year-old Navajo grandmother had made that was made of wolf. He said he was working on a brownstone up the block, And this was where he usually ate his lunch. So I certainly made room for him on the boulder. And we talked for longer than I ever imagined we would have. We talked about our past, and his was a little more interesting than mine. And we talked about exploring New York, because both of us were relatively new. And we decided to go for some walks in this segment of New York. Now, Riverside Park is a 4-mile ramble right along the Hudson River with parks and cafes and gardens. It's a great place to walk. I found out when we went walking together, he had something in common with me. He liked to sing songs. When he sang songs, he sounded like Nat King Cole. He was mellow and smooth. This was the year that Tim Hardin made popular the song, If I Were a Carpenter and You Were a Lady. We agreed that he was my carpenter and I was his lady. I invited him up to my apartment. We had lots of good times there. I felt like Eliza Doolittle. I could have danced all night, but I changed the words. I could have romanced all night and still have begged for more. I did. I spread my wings and felt 1,000 things I'd never felt before. It was amazing. He didn't have a phone at work, so we got into the habit that I would stop on my way home at the brownstone. We'd make a date to go for a walk or have a picnic or go to my place. And that went on for a little while. And then one day he came and knocked on my door when I wasn't expecting him. And he said he was pretty sad. His 100-year-old grandmother had died. And he needed to go out for the tribal rituals and the family gatherings. And his boss was out of town, and he was short of funds. So I went into work and borrowed $200 on my salary, to the amount I'd brought to New York. And I loaned it to him, and we didn't know exactly how long he would need to be gone. I walked in the park and sang. I was happy thinking about our time together. A few weeks later, the brownstone doors were open. I ran upstairs, and he wasn't there, but his boss was. So I asked his boss, "Do you know when Ray's coming back? He's got something I need to get from him." His boss turned around, and he looked me in the eye, and he said, "How much does he owe you?" It was then that I knew the music was over. I'd barely made it down the stairs before I started crying. I went back and threw myself on the sofa, and I cried for hours. I cried for days. I could pull myself together and make it to work, but as soon as I got home, I would fall apart again. He was so beguiling. How could I resist? Why would I even want to? I cried, and then one day I just stopped. And I opened my eyes wide. And I said to myself, "That's not a dull ache inside. That's a glorious agony. I am a passionate woman." And that's it. Beautiful.
If I were a carpenter, you were a lady, and would you marry me anyway? Would you have my baby? If I take on a tinker's trade, would you still find me? Oh, carrying the parts I made, following close behind me. Save my love for loneliness, save my love for sorrow. I've been giving you my loneliness. Won't you give me yours tomorrow? If I work my hands in wood, would you still love me? Now answer me, baby, yes I would. I'd raise you high above me. If I were a miller at a mill wheel grinding, now would you miss your glove?